Okay, David, let's get going. Take it away.
Very good. Thank you, Bruce. Hello, everybody. Great to see you all, those who I can see. Welcome to the winter all region Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network meeting. It's wonderful to have you here. We have a big agenda like always, and we're going to do some looking back and we're going to do some looking ahead. It's kind of like climate change itself, or say a global climate model. We're gonna note the observations we can make about our work in the past, and then we're gonna do some projections into the future. So it's a little bit of a mix and a little like climate change. And I think there'll be some great content and I think some great remembering at the same time. This is the agenda here. You were all sent it ahead of time. I'm not gonna review it item by item. We do always stay on time, so I'm going to be pretty quick and move forward quickly. But I do want to say that during the course of the entire meeting, please follow the practice that we've done recently that works really well, which is if you have news, if you have links, if you have information on the work that you're doing that we should compile, which is one of the things we do, please put it in the chat. The chat is a record that we keep and that we have. And so if you throw things into the chat, it will be recorded as some activities that are going on and will be very valuable as we continue the work that we're doing to collaborate with one another and understand what's happening in the Bay Area on climate adaptation. Okay, so the first section is talking about highlights of the first 4 years of BayCAN, and I'm going to turn it to Bruce and Yeshi to get that started.
Great, thanks, David, and welcome everyone. This is the last regional meeting that Yeshi and I will be with you, and we've been with you for a number of years. So we thought we'd have a little fun here at the beginning. This is climate style fun, and take a kind of a highlights look back at 4 years in the Bay Area. Some great things have happened. As you know, with climate resilience, and we'll highlight some of them. We're not pretending this is some comprehensive review of every good thing and maybe not so good thing that's happened in the region, but some highlights that we picked out, and also how BayCAN was involved in many of those highlight moments. So you can see kind of 5 topics here. We're each going to take 4 minutes times 5 topics and look back a little bit. If I'm going to take the first one, the headline with science is we have an increasing amount and an improving quality of science about Bay Area and climate impacts. So I'll show you some examples. During this couple of years ago, 4 years ago now, we had the first San Francisco Bay Area region report that's part of the state's climate assessment. The state had done 3 climate assessments, all individual studies by academics, mostly of individual issues. But for the first time now, we had 9 of these regional reports to pull existing science together for the region, no new science. And you can see on the right here, the kind of thing that we pulled together for the San Francisco region report, a very important set of studies about is fog increasing or decreasing, and it's decreasing some because that has such a big impact on heat here in the Bay Area. So the regional report was a big step forward, and there'll be another one coming up with the 5th assessment next year. The state has got CalAdapt, and I wasn't a big fan at the beginning, and maybe you weren't either, but I think they've really improved it. This is the public-facing and organization-facing climate data port. And you can see on the screen here, if you haven't used CalAdapt, it's worth taking a look, because I think it's a real good attempt, not perfect, by the state to make data and information about climate localized, available to all of us in local communities. Hold on. Fortunately, there's more and more in the science world and in the research world going into equity. And here are just 2 examples, both from UC Berkeley. Jonathan Apte, a research group, recently came out with a study that was using Google Street View cars to map at a real micro level in certain neighborhoods air pollution from different sources. I won't go into all of this one, but a very interesting study and a good example of academics now and academic research turning to equity issues in a big way. On the right, you may know Mark Stacy. This was from Mark's Riser project. And again, looking at transportation and sea level rise, but now turning in the Riser project to equity issues. And in this case, the example on the screen, if you do certain things to protect shorelines in certain areas of the Bay, what is the impact on communities of concern in terms of travel time? And what's the, how does that compare with non-communities of concern? So a lot more interest now, I think, in a good way on equity and climate in the Bay Area. We have good academic work going on. Remember, Daniel Swain has been with us a couple of times, and this is one of Daniel's slides. So a lot of academic work where it's not the ivory tower anymore. Academics that I'm working with at Berkeley and elsewhere get it, that we've got to be providing, they've got to be providing and working with us hand in hand to provide manageable, actionable data. And this kind of thing from Daniel Swain here on, we may get and we are getting very wet years and very dry years, kind of a whiplash. You've also done some terrific local assessments, and this is from the Big Bay Wave assessment in Marin County. Really great works, good science work to understand different scenarios moving forward with sea level rise. And there's been some, this is just an example, there've been some great things done in various local communities by our BayCAN members and others around the region. Our role has been to kind of advocate for that kind of science and in-green science, but right now we're taking a new role in the last couple of months to start a climate services program. And we have 2 pilots going, one on extreme precip and one on extreme heat. And these are to really work with BayCAN members and scientists together to co-produce and translate and bring research, actionable research to your organization. So that's science, and Yeshi's going to do equity.
Yes, I am. Surprise, surprise. So thank you, Bruce. It's really an important moment, I think, to examine all the ways in which we have evolved as a region and what our part as a network has been in that and what each of your parts has been in that. So I'm really excited to reflect on the way that equity has developed in the past 4 years in a pretty big way, I would say. And this will be a little bit of a recap for some of the folks that were at our equity work group meeting last week. We did some reflecting, looking back and looking ahead there, but this is going to be more general across the network and region. A little anecdote just before beginning, a couple months ago I told this anecdote before to some of you, but I had a really interesting conversation with Phoenix Armenta, one of our co-founders of the working group. We were both in moments of kind of just disheartening around how slow the work is. To do equity work takes time, and in bureaucratic local government systems, it can feel your morale can really get kind of low when things take time. And we were talking about that, and then we took a pause and we thought about where we were at when we first founded the work group meeting 4 years ago, when things were just sort of exploding for equity, and thinking about where we're at now, and actually how 4 years ago we had to do so much work to even just make the case for why equity should be in the conversation at all. And now we're seeing it included and centered in so many spaces statewide, in our network, in each of your work. And we really, I see that there's been a big shift that's happened culturally over the past 4 years. And so this is just a little moment to look at what some of those shifts have been. Next slide. So first and foremost, actually go to the next slide, and then we're going to go back to this one. I wanted to start out by just naming and centering the community organizing that's been at the forefront of all of the work that we do for resilience. They really are leading the charge, and we often as local governments follow their suit. And these are community organizations in our own network that have been doing incredible work for building resilience-based leadership in our region. We have the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project and our own Phoenix Armenta, who started the Shoreline Leadership Academy for developing shoreline leaders for resilience in the face of sea level rise. We have Nuestra Casa and their Parent Leadership Academy that they've started for climate leaders and building education and capacity building for the families in their region down in the South Bay to work directly with local governments. We have Latino service providers, who I'm so excited to introduce you all to. They're one of our newest members. They're working up in the North Bay in Sonoma County with youth, specifically for their Promotores Verdes program, where they're building capacity for youth to work directly with local governments on climate planning and climate work. So amazed by that work. And last but not least, NorCal Resilience Network and their Resilience Hub leadership training, another incredible example of building capacity at the community level to engage with state and local government agencies in resilience building. Now, can we go back to the previous slide? Just wanted to start right off the bat with that, because the rest of what we do is sort of following suit of that community charge, including an amazing amount of reports that have been published in the past 4 years. We have, obviously, similar to how Bruce named, the fourth assessment had an incredible climate justice report, which really shifted the needle on climate justice and centering that conversation statewide. And then the summary report for tribal and indigenous communities within California, yet another example of the body of work around indigenous and tribal resilience, which has really become central to this field. APEN's Resilience Before Disaster report is an amazing example of how we've taken the existing crises of our moment in time and developed resources and best practices to respond to what's coming now. They published this in the middle of lockdown, and a lot of it responds to COVID as well as climate. And then we have some amazing guidebooks like the Equitable Community-Driven Climate Preparedness Planning Guide from USDN, the Movement Strategy Center, a similar report that's more a framework for looking at things called the Community-Driven Climate Resilience Planning Framework from NACRP, and so many other guides like this, which provide step-by-step guidance for our practitioners on how to do this work. And as you all know, we have a resource guide that outlines what those different resources are. Okay. Forward 2 slides. We have amazing new models for collaboration that we've seen across the Bay, which I'm personally so inspired by. I'm amazed by programs like PACE, the Partners in Advancing Climate Equity program through SGC, which is building capacity for local leaders to work, again, with climate leaders across governments and state agencies. And this one's actually initiated at a statewide level for statewide leaders. We have local examples like Climate Ready SMC, which is doing amazing collaborative work. Again, these are just naming a few examples. There's so many more. The Bay Adapt process has been an amazing example of community advisory committees having a real impact on plans that happen region-wide. And Bruce and I have even worked with academics in Berkeley to help them develop more equitable processes in their grant funding proposals and working with community for different equity and climate research projects. Next slide. And of course, we've seen so much shift at the statewide level and in terms of funding. That's one of the hugest ones. The climate resilience bond, yes, there's 5% for community resilience, which is 250 million, but you see across the board in all of the funding that's been allocated, there's huge focus in every section on equitable processes and funding in our communities that are on the front lines of climate change. And some of the programs that have been most exciting that we've seen funded is the Transformative Climate Communities program, which has been championed by CEJA, and then of course SB 1072, which is building regional resilience collaboratives in specifically our frontline communities. And then in ARCA, at the statewide level with other regional collaboratives, we engaged for the past 2 years on an embedding equity and adaptation planning year-long overhaul process for the statewide network. So that was a really amazing process we engaged in as well. Next slide. And one thing to celebrate is that this has amounted to an amazing amount of climate plans that have centered and been fully equitable in process. Well, fully, okay, that's and nothing's ever fully equitable, but stepping towards more equitable processes as we're making our climate plans in ways that are very inspiring. I'm amazed by the work they've done at San Leandro and their climate action plan and the community process there. The equitable climate action plan at the city of Oakland underwent an amazing community process as well. And then we have plans like the Marin City People's Plan through the Resilient by Design process that was actually spearheaded and started within the community with finding city support after. So that's yet another model. And there's so many more beyond this. These are just a few examples to celebrate. And then it just comes down to BayCAN's role. There's so much happening across the region. And so we ask, what is our role? And we found our niche role through the equity program and the equity work group. We have learned that providing resources to our members, so that like the resource guide, so you can get the best resources to do this work, has been a really important part of the process. In addition to that, we've produced trainings such as the operationalizing equity and adaptation planning training specifically for our members, as well as doing lots of other trainings in-house through the equity work group meetings, like characteristics of white supremacy training. We did that one. We have had folks from Bar High come in and give trainings on their tools. We do in-house trainings as well as ones for the wider network. And we offer consultations, which has been a really huge and exciting part of our work together, which means that we get to work one-on-one with our members on whatever stage of the process they're in with their equitable adaptation work. And the slide is a little funky, but the fourth category is our network convenings. And these are just pictures from some of our equity work group meetings, both in person and digitally. We've built a really amazing community of practice together, where we're sharing best practices, we're working on our projects together, we're checking in on each other and sharing updates and learning from each other in big ways. Next slide. So all of that is just to say and celebrate that we have indeed built an amazing culture of equity across the Bay Area. Some of that has happened through BayCAN. Most of it's just happened through the organic evolution of our field and our state. And we have a pretty amazing crew of people. This was at our last equity work group meeting last week, where folks' true personalities really came through. And I'm going to miss you all very much. Okay, back to you, Bruce.
Thank you, Yeshi, and thanks to everyone who's taken part in our equity working group and now equity program. It has been, I think, the biggest change in the Bay Area and in the last 3-4 years, and certainly same true at BayCAN itself. So let's look at funding as the third part of this look back over the last 3-4 years in the Bay Area. Unfortunately, it's been slow progress. You know, we've asked you at BayCAN, and we've asked other groups for years, what do you need to move forward? And the obvious number one answer is always funding. You know, we're still scraping for funding for much of this work that should be right in the center of local government work and work by regional agencies and others. Some progress, I would say, to celebrate, but I think more looking forward, and we'll be talking about that later in the program today. So looking at things that have worked in terms of funding, the state, as you may know, has put a lot of money, billions at this point, into real on-the-ground work and planning for both wildfires and drought. Why did they do this? Because we've been hit by a record number of wildfires and size of wildfires and damage from wildfires, all those records. And it's been impossible to ignore in Sacramento. So a lot of money has been allocated by the state, billions at this point, for wildfire protection, really for on the ground work. Even some of this just paid off, they think, with the Calder fire, that certain areas didn't burn, that had thinning and other protective measures taken. The state has also put a lot of money and time into drought, as we've hit another drought here in the last couple of years. Maybe with all of this rain, we're pulling ourselves at least partially out of that drought, but that's been pretty severe for a couple of years. And when we talk about drought here in the Bay Area and elsewhere, we are again talking about a big equity issue. This isn't just about can you water your lawn or not, or a variety of things, or having to cut back 10% maybe, or 20% even in terms of personal or business water use. In the Central Valley in particular, drought is a huge equity issue with small rural communities that have run out of water or had water sources heavily polluted, both and exacerbated by the drought. So a lot of money so far in the last few years on wildfire and on drought. Now, there have been some good grant programs, and we thank the Coastal Conservancy Climate Ready program every day because many of you have received those grants. This has been a lifeline for adaptation planning up and down the coast. And you can see on the screen here some of the more recent grants. Climate Ready has, I think, done a little over 12 million in 62 different projects, and a number of those projects going to low income or disadvantaged communities. So congratulations for the State Coastal Conservancy's Climate Ready program. There have also been some regional funding improvements in the last couple of years. And remember, we all voted for Measure A, the parcel tax, some years back for wetlands restoration and bay protection. The first regional parcel tax in California, not just the first for climate, the first period that was passed in the 9-county region. So it applies to the 9-county region. And the authority is handing out now millions in grants for shoreline protection, for climate change and all around the bay. And on the right side of the screen here, you'll see they now have a community grants program where different disadvantaged communities, under-resourced communities and all in the region here can receive up to $100,000 grants for planning and participation in a variety of shoreline projects around the region. So again, a round of applause for this region for voting for the funding, and now for the Restoration Authority to do a good job of getting these grants going. I think it's 500 million over 20 years. There have also been, thankfully, and we're starting to see more of this, some local measures for climate. And this one is Measure C for Marin County, which the voters passed, I believe, last year. And it set up the Marin Wildfire Protection Authority. It set up a new authority with funding to do a whole set of things around fire protection. And it's a range of things. It's not just forest thinning and all, it's education, it's a whole series of things, and a great example, again, of local funding. We're going to need local, regional, state, and federal. We're just kind of scratching the surface, but these are some good examples of things that have happened in the last couple of years. Our role has been to try to advocate as best we can through ARCA and other chances we get. That funding has got to really ramp up, and we're starting to see, as I mentioned, some response from the state, which we'll talk about later. We work to obviously publicize and promote grant programs to all of you, and shouldn't forget that we are funded by you. That's been our funding source. So thank you for your membership dues that have made BayCAN possible. So I'll turn it back to Yesh, and Yesh is going to do projects.
Yes, yeah, there is so much to celebrate in terms of how many projects have been launched, initiated, and completed in the past 4 years for climate adaptation in our region, just in this membership alone. And I wanted to go over some of those quickly. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, I guess, can I share my screen, Bruce?
You can.
And then we'll go back. I just want to show you all really quickly the matrix that Bruce and I compiled this past year, just to scroll through so you can see how many projects are in this membership alone for climate adaptation. This is just Marin County, this whole page, still Marin County. And we go through in San Rafael, and it's region by region, and it just goes on and on. Sonoma Water, Alameda, it goes on. And I could really keep scrolling, but I just wanted to show you all just a visual of how much has been done. And in my little moment right now presenting, I'm just going to highlight a couple projects, but the list is quite endless in terms of the resilience projects that have happened in our region. All right, back to your screen, Bruce. So as he pulls that up, one of the first things that I wanted to highlight, are we getting it? Yeah, is that there have been some new agencies that have even formed, which to me is one of the biggest telltale signs of how much this is being prioritized in our region, that not only are we initiating projects, we're forming new agencies as a region to meet the needs of this incredibly impending crisis we're in. So some of those include the Sonoma County Office of Resilience and Recovery, which is so exciting that that exists now. Marin County started a Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which has been super important for their wildfire work. And then San Mateo started a One Shoreline District, which has been really amazing for their work in shoreline resilience. Next slide. We've had a lot that's happened just on the front of heat, drought, and fire, which is also something that BayCAN is focused on and published a lot of resources around, because those are three really pressing things that come to us every summer and fall and all the time, really. And some of the projects to highlight from there that we're excited about: the Cooling Our Communities project in Alameda County has been really inspiring. There's been an amazing San Francisco vulnerability and heat map and story tool that's been really useful for them. That's heat. Drought, we have examples like the Palo Alto and Valley Water One Water paradigm shift and plan, which has been huge for drought, as well as the Napa Valley Drought Contingency Plan. And then in terms of fire, of course, again, countless. And we have examples like the Berkeley Community Resilience Center initiative, which has been really huge for wildfire smoke, especially in Berkeley. And Sonoma Water has done some really amazing work on wildfire as well. Okay, next slide. Another amazing thing to celebrate is just sheer how many climate action plans have been published. This is not even scratching the surface of the amount of reports and plans that have been published, but these are some of the ones that are highlighted in our matrix. Just take a look, folks. Look how much has happened. We've got East Bay Mud, Berkeley, Livermore, Sonoma Water, Alameda County, San Mateo, City of Alameda, Santa Clara County, San Leandro, Oakland, all members of BayCAN that have been doing incredible work for adaptation. Next slide. We've also seen amazing mapping projects become initiated and be completed as well. We have examples like the Alameda County heat map is here. I know that's not complete, but I just thought I'd show a little image of that. San Francisco heat vulnerability map, yet again, just to show how important that's been. The deriving and drawing of data for the use of the public has been huge, as well as for planners. And then we've had really innovative projects such as East Bay Mud's PSPS power shutoff map for the public, so that folks can identify where these events may be happening, which has been really huge. Next slide. So again, we come back to BayCAN's role in all of this. We find our way of supporting you all to do this work through examples like the resources we develop and the webinars we have. We have things like the drought resource guide, which is specifically for resources to help you all deal with drought. We put out our newsletter every week, which has every month, which has the latest adaptation news and what's happening across the network, as well as at BayCAN. And then we have webinars that happen quarterly, if not more frequently, on really core issues that are pressing for our membership. We also do networking, and that's been, you all that we're doing it right now, the convenings that we have regionally, the work group meetings, the times we have calls. We have a counties call that's been happening regularly, which is really exciting to support the counties in their work, and the list goes on. We have work groups and programs that have been really important for our supporting you all in the work. We have the Climate Services Program, which is launching and becoming its own entity as we speak. We have the Equity Program, which I spoke to earlier. We have a Climate Communications Working Group, which is in the process of being formed right now. And of course, the Assessment to Adaptation Working Group, which began some years ago to support our members in moving from the assessment phase of the adaptation project to the actual adaptation planning process. And finally, we have consultations, which yet again can support our members in working with you individually in whatever stage of the adaptation planning process you're at, connecting you with each other, and just creating that web of relationships so folks know who's doing what in our region, connecting folks to who they need to be connecting to, and offering our expertise as we can, knowing that you all are really the experts. Next slide. Back to you, Bruce.
Thanks, Yesh. And again, we're we were not trying to present a comprehensive look at every project or all of your great work, just to pick some highlights. And there are quite a few. That's the bottom line here. So final section of this little look back. As you know, while we've been doing all this work, we've seen a real acceleration, fairly obvious in the Bay Area, from the impacts of climate change, both here in our region and in California. And just to take a minute or two to hit on those. First, wildfires, obviously. We set records in 2017 and broke those records in 2018 in terms of size of fires and damage from fires, loss of life from fires, the Camp Fire in 2018. And then we had 2019 kind of off because, you know, we need conditions for fires and ignition, and we just didn't have the ignitions that year. 2020, we broke the records again, and we had some of the largest fires in California history. You can see this little list here of the top 15, of which the ones recently have been shooting up the list, unfortunately. So 2020 was a huge fire season, both here and elsewhere in California. And then 2021, we just had the Dixie Fire north of Tahoe, that for the massive fire that went for months, and for the first time burned from the west side of the Sierra over the summit and down the east side. We also had the Colder Fire, big fire on the Highway 50 and up into Echo and Tahoe region. So record-setting wildfires in terms of size, damage, loss of life. Conditions for wildfires have really changed in California. Hotter, drier vegetation, all of the conditions. And you know, again, while fires are hitting everyone in some fashion and smoke events are even a broader area, obviously the equity issues here with wildfire are huge. And people that work outdoors, people that don't have a way to get out of town, obviously, even as some people do when things get bad, the equity issues with wildfires in our region and in our state have certainly worsened. Drought is the second thing, obviously, in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of impacts. We've once again gone into a record-setting drought here. In terms of depth, we may be, as we said, pulling out of it, but huge issues in terms of drought, both for humans and for ecosystems and all in our state and in our region. And at the same time that we're seeing drought, we're also seeing more intense atmospheric river events, what we used to call Pineapple Express. Daniel Swain and others have talked with this. There's a lot of new and interesting research on these AR events, but we're seeing kind of this feast or famine of big dry periods and big wet periods, as Daniel said, the kind of whiplash effect. And underneath this all, you know, is the temperature rise. The global temperature rise continues. We just, the last 7 years globally have been the hottest 7-year period in recorded history, you know, on and on with the global records. But looking locally, I mean, look at these couple of things I just put up, and I could have put 10 more here on the screen. For San Francisco, that we've gone from, we used to set records every year for hot and cold days, and now we're just setting records mainly for hot days. And this is true across the state, San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles, all of it. And we're getting extremes, more extremes. It's not just a degree here or a degree and a half there. Our extreme temperatures in August to October, those 3 months in 2020, shattered records across California. It didn't just break them by a bit. It was by far the warmest 3-month period that we had like that. So we're doing great work. We're making great progress. We're also facing increased and substantial acceleration of impacts. And so let's get to work more. That is our look back. We love working with all of you on your part in all of this, and we celebrate the Bay Area's working on all.
Thank you, Bruce and Yeshi, so much for that look back. I want to say the future is bright, but actually the future is scary. But what I think is bright is that the amount of activity that's going on in the Bay Area, the amount of collaboration that we're doing, the way we're learning from one another, and what someone recently echoed what I've been saying for a while, which is this is an infant kind of industry. We're learning how to do this, and I think learning from each other, and learning about from everything from the science on how to do this in an equitable way is what makes the Bay Area special and unique, in other places as well. And I think the enterprise of adapting is moving along, and we have a shot at avoiding the most scary outcomes, and that's what we're about. Bruce mentioned this is his and Yeshi's last meeting. I forgot to mention at the top, I've been so absorbed in it. Stick around until the end for a short tribute to Bruce and Yeshi if you can. But now let's move to our next item. Zoe Siegel and Berna Idris from the Greenbelt Alliance are going to talk about a new contribution to the understanding of resilience and their resilience playbook. Zoe and Berna, take it over.
Thanks, David, Bruce, and Yeshi. It's hard to go after that and hearing about all of the great work that's happened over the last few years. And I've really enjoyed being a part of BayCAN and look forward to continuing to work with all of you. For those who I don't know, my name is Zoe Siegel, and I am the Director of Climate Resilience at Greenbelt Alliance. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Berna Idris. Berna, are you there?
Yes, hi. I feel like sometimes you get lost in all the tiny boxes. Yeah, really nice to be here. Thank you again to the BayCAN team. I echo Zoe's belief about, boy, what a presentation to follow. Hopefully our work builds upon all of our partners' work that was highlighted just now. It's really exciting to be working on this as a region. And I'll share my screen. Hopefully I can do that. Yep. And we can get started here with our presentation.
Cool. So yeah, today we're going to be sharing a little bit more information about our new tool, the Resilience Playbook. Some of you guys may have heard about it. Apologies if it's repeat information for any of you, but there are many ways that it can be used, and we're going to talk a bit today about our work at Greenbelt Alliance, and then share how the playbook came about, and then talk about how you can all use it and navigate it and build on it. And we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. And if you have questions about the playbook or any questions for us, feel free to drop them in the chat throughout this presentation.
You can see my screen, right? Because I can't see my screen. You see the presentation?
Oh yeah, we can see your screen.
Fantastic.
So I think many of you are familiar with Greenbelt Alliance, so I'll make this brief, but we're a nonprofit organization based in the Bay Area, and our mission is to educate, advocate, and collaborate to make the Bay Area's lands and communities more resilient to a changing climate. And like many of you on this call, we envision a Bay Area of healthy, thriving, resilient communities made of lands and people that recover safely during disasters and are resilient to wildfire, floods, and drought. And we really envision a place where everyone is living with nature in new and powerful ways for generations to come. And this understanding of resilience is really influenced in part by our legacy of advocating for the protection of the Bay Area's natural and working lands during our 60-year history. And we know that with the appropriate policies, like the ones we highlight in the Resilience Playbook, and like many of all of you highlight in your climate action plans and all of the great work that you do, the Bay Area can really address our housing crisis and our climate crisis while protecting the unique natural ecosystems that ensure that our most vulnerable communities can respond to the climate crisis. Because Californians are both on the front line of the climate crisis and the housing crisis, residents around our region are really facing significant economic, social, and health challenges. And the climate hazards are really hitting some communities harder than others. And these impacts, along with our deeply embedded history of exclusionary zoning, growing income inequality, means that people of color and economically disadvantaged communities often bear the brunt of the climate crisis. Once again, don't have to go into too much detail about this for you guys. So we recognize that our region has an immense opportunity to take a holistic approach to advancing the solutions that address our overlapping environmental, economic, social, and housing challenges simultaneously. And we can solve these issues while centering people in our land use decisions on how we use and protect our lands and how we grow our communities. And we're fortunate to live in a region with a strong level of environmental awareness. And just being on this call in the presence of all of you guys doing all of this great work. We're really proud to work with all of you, and look forward to continuing to work with all of you to really take the time to fight climate change and protect our communities. But at the same time, as you probably know intimately, local governments and local climate activists can feel overwhelmed and frustrated by the decisions being made and the pace that we're moving at. And this is exacerbated by the fact that different local actors might not share the same knowledge and language around climate policy making. So we wanted to address all of these challenges in a user-friendly online tool called the Resilience Playbook. And throughout our advocacy work over our 60-year history, and based on many more recent interviews with countless elected officials and partners, we've really identified this need to support this complex relationship between stakeholders in our region in a way that's accessible to all and offers tangible steps on how to address the dual climate and housing crises. And that is why we've created this comprehensive tool like the Resilience Playbook to really bring the public, policy practitioners, planners, and other stakeholders together to establish a common understanding of the climate challenges and the opportunities that our region faces. Okay, so you may be thinking, that's great, but what is the Resilience Playbook? The playbook brings together a collection of curated strategies, resources, and toolkits, many of which you have all worked on. So we're really harnessing all of the great work that's already been happening around the region to really support local decision makers and community leaders as they look to accelerate their region's adaptation to the climate risks. This includes policy and planning recommendations, practical template language, and innovative example ordinances that you can use to accelerate adaptation to multiple climate risks. And to accelerate our vision, we worked with artist Alfred Twu to illustrate how our vision would come to life if we enacted these policies that leverage natural and working lands, absorb floodwaters, sequester carbon, protect water supply, and provide buffers from wildfires. And in tandem, we also address the critical issue of advancing housing justice, planning for a just transition away from fossil fuels towards green jobs, and pursuing environmental justice to ensure that the outcomes of these policies really prioritize the resilience of the most vulnerable communities. The playbook is divided into the 5 following action areas. I'm going to run through them quickly. I think none of this will be super new for any of you working in this field, but I wanted to just give you a taste of what's in the playbook and show some examples. So our first chapter is centering people and equity first. And in order to make our communities more resilient, as you know, we need to enact bolder policies that center the community members who are most impacted by the climate and housing crises. These tend to be our low income and communities of color. Most of our work as an organization is centered around providing a more equitable, just future for the most vulnerable populations. And in order to do this, we must make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, provide more affordable homes, and incorporate nature-based solutions and accelerate a just transition away from fossil fuels. So our first chapter, and really a center point of the entire Resilience Playbook, really focuses on prioritizing people and equity in the planning process. And we also already are beginning to see how sea level rise and drought will pose a serious threat to our homes, livelihoods, and industries located along the shoreline. And as you know, it's critical that we address this complex, interconnected overlay of these risks on our region across multiple sectors. So the Protecting Communities from Flood and Drought chapter takes it the protect, accommodate, retreat approach. And we also highlight, beyond kind of shoreline sea level rise, we highlight policies for inland flooding, groundwater rise, and things like that. And then, we're seeing more wildfires burning, as Bruce was already discussing today. And we need to enact policies that require conservation of undeveloped land in high fire risk areas to create defensible space and natural wildfire buffers. Greenbelt Alliance, for those who know our history, was really built on protecting open space, encouraging green belts around cities. And I think now we're really identifying the value of those, but for this wildfire purpose. And so the playbook details ways that we can coexist with wildfire through land use decision making. And then when we don't create enough homes for people of all income levels, prices go up, and working class and low income families can't afford to live in the communities that they have resided in for generations. So this is why it's really critical to support growth in safe infill locations. And I think, we're seeing in many climate action plans that cities, like San Francisco, have really started to incorporate housing policies into the climate action plans we're seeing the connections that cities are making between the housing crisis and the climate crisis. And the focus of our housing chapter really offers what is needed to equitably address the housing crisis through a climate lens. And then, of course, harnessing the power of nature, we also need to support the role of natural and working lands in providing nature-based climate resilience to people and ecosystems, while contributing to public health and safety, providing critical habitat and connectivity, offering park and recreation opportunities, and yielding carbon sequestration benefits. This piece is often overlooked, yet powerful tool for our region. So we have an entire chapter detailing how to harness the power of nature for resilience. But all of this is probably not new to any of you. And so now that you kind of have an understanding of what is in the playbook, I'm going to pass it off to Berna, who's going to show you the playbook and show you how you and your staff can use it. So take it away, Berna.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, when we were creating this tool, we knew it would be effective if it really brought some diverse audiences together as a shared tool to work from. And, there are many people across our region, from activists to elected officials, city staff, a lot of you folks, and everyone in between, who want to support communities on the path to climate resilience, but we might not all share the same language. Or some of us might lack, the technical policy knowledge or subject area expertise about very specific things related to climate resilience. So we were really hoping with this tool geared towards these three distinct audiences: community members, community-based organizations, city, county staff, and elected officials, that this could be a good starting place. And because each of these groups would use the playbook slightly differently, we created the resource to be accessible in a variety of ways. So I'm going to go through the playbook a little bit, talk about these three different audiences and channels, and show you how each of those audiences would navigate the playbook and pull some value out of it. Sorry. So first, the first group that we really wanted to gear the playbook towards is the community and community-based organizations. We are hoping that the playbook would break down complicated technical knowledge for folks in the community who might want to get involved in the process of a general plan update or climate action plan update, but might not know all of the technical planning language. There's also policy recommendations in the playbook about policies that are very commonly in general plans and climate action plans. So we are hoping that community-based organizations could organize around the policies of the playbook. And we've already had a lot of feedback from folks who have used the playbook to write public comment for plan updates or housing element updates, and everyone's saying it's so easy to be able to go into the playbook, pick out the policy language, and use it as a template to write like a letter or a public comment, because all of the technical explanations are already there as a tool. And the playbook also breaks down different governance structures, so folks are new to the planning space, then they can really understand, like, what is a general plan? What are their general plan updates? What are laws that from the state level that influence general plans? So we include all of that content. Another group that we are gearing the playbook towards is for elected officials to learn more about adaptation strategies. There's example model policies and case studies from around the region in the playbook, and some of them are actually explained already on the call as examples from BayCAN. We have a little case study on the one shoreline approach in San Mateo because we think that's an awesome model, and there's other examples and case studies. And we're hoping that this allows folks to work from the same resource as agency staff and community members, elected officials. And we really designed this to allow everyone to craft local strategies together. And of course, last but not least, city and county staff can utilize the playbook in a number of ways. We know that, incorporating climate policies like the ones listed in the playbook is just the beginning step. There are also policies on and guidance on how to break down silos, bring departments together, and streamline climate resilience projects. And many of the examples were pulled from the region. So we were, looking at best practices from the region and innovative approaches, and we put them as inspiration in the playbook so folks can learn more from each other. And we hope, as more and more amazing projects like the one on this call are being highlighted, then we can add that content to the playbook. We also provide recommendations for meaningful community engagement so that city and county staff can design workshops and projects that capture the needs of the diverse communities we work with and bring frontline voices to the table. And that community engagement portion was actually influenced by one of our partners on this project, Richmond Land, which is a community land trust. And they do, work on community land trust projects and also stewardship. And they were involved in the Contra Costa General Plan update, and they organized a lot of their community members to get involved in that process. And based on their experiences of the questions that community members had, like about getting involved and doing the advocacy and what that process is like, they joined as partners on the playbook and brought that knowledge and said, like, these were some of the engagement barriers that our community members faced when they were engaging in something like a general plan update. These are some of the questions they had. So they brought their expertise to the centering people and equity portion of the playbook to provide us with some recommendations on how to do community engagement from their own experiences. And we hope as we continue this process and have more conversations with you all, once more best practices are established, we can reflect that in the playbook. And now that I've talked a little bit about the audiences, we should actually dive into the playbook website, and I can show you a little bit about how to navigate it. So I should be sharing my entire screen. So if I go like this, can you see the playbook website?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, fantastic. Nice. So this is the playbook website. When you first go to resilienceplaybook.org, you will see that there are two menus, and we really intended this platform to be interactive and easy to use to accommodate the fact that we do have these different audiences, so users can have whatever journey they will like. And I think that's the powerful experience of the playbook, is that if you're already an expert in some of these issue areas and you really want to go deep into the nitty-gritty policy recommendations, then you can click up here on policy matrix and you'll be able to see all of the detailed recommendations from all of the chapters. But let's just say you're not there yet and you want to learn a little bit more about the tool. We have an introduction that talks a little bit about what our motivation was and what our region is facing. I'm sure all of you know that. Then we have a how to navigate section where it talks about how you can utilize the resilience playbook, where to add climate policies. This would be helpful for folks who, might want to get in the process of advocating, but not know a little bit about these different plans that are common in communities. So we have a breakdown of that. And then I'll go into these other issue areas. But first, let's take a deep dive into one of these chapters. We'll start with protecting communities from floods and droughts, since we just talked about that. So each section starts off with providing background of the topic at hand, and then discusses some of the most pressing risks. And in these little blue boxes, you'll see some case studies that we have. So this is the what's at risk, just kind of a very high level overview of what's at risk for sea level rise in our region. And to make this as accessible as possible, we added hover definition to some terminology that might not be accessible to everyone, and that is throughout the playbook, and hopefully we'll be able to add more. And then we have the critical actions to take now, which are kind of the high level solutions that can combat the challenge that we outlined in each of the theme sections. So these are just, like Zoe mentioned, the protect, accommodate, and avoid policies that we have, and some other high level solutions. And then if you scroll all the way down to policy matrix, we have the in detailed policies. So for example, a lot of cities right now are doing their safety element update, and part of the safety element is discussing floods. So this would be a good resource for the community to get started in that process, to learn more about, flooding and the safety element, but then also practitioners can go and see some of the recommendations. And a lot of these policies are pulled from the region. And I'm sure some of you have worked on these policies. We really tried to outline some of the best practices and reviewed with our partners to pull in the best policies. So that is kind of how each chapter looks. And then we have the implementing climate policies section, because we know that we have to go beyond just the policy recommendations. And we're really hoping to build this out more with experience as folks use the playbook. But we have a whole section discussing governance challenges, talking about innovative ways to address governance issues. We have some more case studies. We have some critical actions to take now to address governance issues. And then there's an entire section on monitoring and metrics, recommendations on how to make the general plan more measurable and to operationalize some of the goals. And finally, because we know that there is no shortage of incredible resources, and a lot of our resources were pulled from some of the amazing work that you all have done, we have a toolkit section, which we're constantly adding to. So if the playbook wasn't enough and you want to get more in detail about all of these different topics and have access to different resources, we have this toolkit section that goes into some different issue areas. There's element-specific resources. If you want to look at resources with an equity lens, you can check out some of the resources in here. And if you have any resources that are not in the toolkit that you would like for us to highlight in the playbook, please feel free to reach out. We're constantly trying to add more and more tools in here as new projects are coming out. So that's a little bit on the playbook. And then I'll tell you in a moment about our commitment for a resilient Bay Area. Let me go back to the presentation here. You're all seeing my presentation now, right? Okay, great.
Yes, Berna, can you wrap up in about a minute?
Yes.
Thank you.
So last but not least, we made this commitment for a resilient Bay Area to bring folks in collaboration and to hold ourselves, elected officials, institutions, and communities accountable to really take climate action. So if you resonated with the goals of our playbook, and I'm sure you all do because you didn't do the same work as us, then you can sign our commitment for a resilient Bay Area. And these are some of the community leaders that I've already signed, and I'll put that in the chat after our presentation. And finally, moving forward, this is just kind of the beginning. And what we hope to do next is actually have topic-specific webinars starting from next month, focusing on housing and going through all of the different issue areas of the playbook. We're also doing localized workshops based on need to do community education. So if any of you want to partner to use the playbook and to do a workshop for your community on one of these issue areas and break down some of this content together, then we're working on that. We also made the playbook a website so we can have some timely content updates as new research comes out. And I would love to hear more from you when you interact with the playbook and have, share experiences of what it was like, so we can have future updates and learn more about how to make the tool stronger. And yeah, that's about it.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Bernadette. And thanks to all of you. There's a few of you out there that, you or your organization also took time to review and add policies to the playbook. So we really appreciate all of the support that we've gotten so far. And this is kind of playbook 1.0. And to Warner's question, it's entirely online right now because we are kind of, in this Zoom world. It was originally conceived as a printed document, but because we are all interacting digitally, we made it a priority to make the digital version first. And we have plans to create a print version, I think probably for our 2.0 version. So we'll add a few more policies, we'll tweak a few things. And then hopefully, once we're doing more in-person work that we can really use an in-person guide like this, we'll have a print version.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Berna. We can take a few questions, maybe. David, a couple minutes here.
We can. We had one in the chat from Carolyn earlier. I think this was hinted at a little bit. Are there sample ordinances or templates for local government to use at all explored in the playbook?
Yeah, so we have some ordinances that we are, working on and aren't quite fully in the playbook yet. So that will come in the 2.0 version. Right now, we have a significant number of policies that could be expanded on to be ordinances. I think we're talking with a couple of cities about building out and like a model ordinance.
Very good, thank you. Other questions?
David, there was also one about, have you shown this to OPR? And I think your answer was yes, but I think the bigger question is, how can we help you get this used more? I mean, this is a tremendous piece of work. Obviously, a lot went into this, and we'd like to see it succeed.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And yeah, we worked with OPR kind of on the creation of the document. A lot of their tools are, cited in our toolkit and throughout the document. And I think, as all of you know, there are no shortage of guides and toolkits out there. And I think, creating it was great, but now is really the moment where we want to use it. And I think as an organization, we're really working to use it and to share as much as possible to make sure that it really is a useful tool. So if you guys have, a committee meeting or a planning commission meeting or any kind of group where you think it would be useful for them to learn a little bit more about any of these issues or the toolkit itself, we would be happy to give a presentation or talk with anyone that you think would be, if you need a little bit of an advocacy push anywhere, we would be happy to plug in there. And we found it already being very useful for, local advocates to who may not be as well versed in all of these policies to kind of write letters to their planning commission or, pull out key things that they wouldn't have already known about. So yeah, if we can support any of your work through the playbook in any way, we would be happy to.
Great.
Yeah, I think part of the strength of this document is like with the breakdown of all these different issue areas and really important updates to like housing elements, safety elements, and environmental justice elements happening across the Bay Area. We really want to be able to like use this playbook as a starting point and then do workshops to, help support community education around some of these issues. And some jurisdictions have already reached out to say like, let's partner to do like a housing element workshop and explain that and do, more public education. So we're always open to presenting this to planning staff or, collaborating to maybe do a workshop around one of these timely updates to support the climate education that needs to happen.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Last question. Well, let us thank Zoe and Berna very much for introduction to this incredible resource. So everybody go online, take a look, and part of our effort to learn from one another and collaborate is incorporating understandings built in this process. So thank you again, Zoe and Berna. Our next item is one of our favorite things to do, which is breakouts. We have 2 of them today. And the first one is going to start in a moment. I'm going to ask Bruce to explain now what we're going to do.
Thanks, David. And thanks again to Greenbelt. Terrific stuff. And, as always, getting things like this used is the real key. So I'll happily commit the future people that run BayCAN to work with you over the next months. I'm sure they will want to, whoever they may be. So we're doing 2 of these today as part of the meeting where we stop talking to you and we let you talk to each other and inspire each other and meet each other. The whole point of these breakouts is with a question that we think is relevant that we'd like to hear from you on, but to really help you meet some new people or re-meet people that you've known before in this space. So this is kind of our social time where we have some focused discussion in small groups. We're going to split you up in a minute into small groups of maybe 5, 6 people. You have 20 minutes. Here is the first question, and then we'll have a second one later in the program. In 3 years, where would you like the Bay Area to be on climate resilience? What would you like the Bay Area to look like? What would be your picture in 3 years for the Bay Area in terms of climate resilience? What would the region look like? Describe it a bit. What would kind of success in 3 years look like? So 20 minutes, let everybody talk. There are no facilitators, so please be respectful and self-facilitate there. And when you come back, we'd like to encourage you to put ideas that you had or that somebody else had that you thought were good in the chat box so we can record some of those. So give me a second here and let me pull up the breakout rooms, and we've got 10 rooms. I'm going to open the rooms and we'll give you a 5-minute warning, a 10-minute warning and a 5-minute warning when we're going to stop. It'll be about 20 minutes, and we'll open the rooms now.